Hello everyone. This presentation is about genome-wide association studies. In this, we are going to understand the role of genome-wide association studies or GWAS in understanding the genetic associations which exist in a population. So, what is GWAS? A genome-wide association study, abbreviated as GWAS, is a research approach used to identify genomic variants that are statistically associated with a risk of a disease or a particular trait or a phenotype. So this method involves surveying the genomes of many people, looking for genomic variants that occur more frequently in those with a specific disease or trait compared to those without that disease or trait. Once new genetic associations are identified, researchers can use the information to develop strategies to detect, treat, and prevent the disease. Such studies are particularly useful in finding genetic variations that contribute to common complex diseases such as cancer, asthma, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, mental illnesses, etc. Genetic variation refers to the differences in DNA sequences among individuals. These variations can take the form of single nucleotide polymorphism or SNPs, insertions, deletions, or sometimes structural changes in the genome. Then there are copy number variations, which is also abbreviated as CNVs, which refers to a condition in which the number of copies of a specific segment of DNA varies among different individual genomes. The individual variants may be short or include thousands of bases. These structural differences may have come about through duplications, deletions, or other changes, and they can affect long stretches of DNA. So such regions may or may not contain a gene or genes. These variations, they can influence an individual's risk of developing diseases or their response to drugs or their phenotypic traits. So the genome-wide association studies or GWAS uses these genetic variations or the genetic variation data, especially the SNPs, to determine whether a certain variations are more common in people with a particular condition, such as diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, or the overall average height of a particular population. So in GWAS, the researchers look for statistical associations between the specific genetic variants and the phenotypic traits or diseases. So if certain variants are consistently found in individuals with a certain trait or condition, these variants are considered to be linked to that particular trait or disease. The first GWAS study was published in 2005, and after that the study approach just took off exponentially. So over a period of time, this is 2024, jivas have grown significantly, both in terms of the sample size, going from initial sample sizes of several thousand individuals to the current sample sizes of tens and thousands and hundreds of individuals, and also in terms of number of diseases which are being studied, and also the associated variants that have been discovered so far. So, as mentioned earlier, because of the exponential rise in the GWAS studies, up till now, GWAS results have been published in more than 4,300 articles reporting more than 55,000 unique genetic associations with nearly 5,000 traits and diseases. And results from all these GWAS studies have been curated, and they are in one particular catalog which is known as NHGRI-EBI Catalog of Human Genome Wide Association Studies. In this slide, you can see the link to this catalog where one can find all the studies which have been done till now, which are involving the study of the association between the traits and the diseases and the variants which are present in the human population. So let us try to focus on some of the key concepts which are related to GWAS studies. Number one is SNPs, which is single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are used in GWAS studies. Number two is the haplotypes, which are the group of SNPs which are inherited together. And then we have linkage disequilibrium, which is correlated with the genetic variants. GWAS seeks to identify the single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs that are common to the human genome, and to determine how these polymorphisms are distributed across the different populations. So, on a broad scale, these studies help scientists uncover the associations between individual SNPs and the disorders that are passed from one generation to the next in the usual Mendelian fashion. So that is on a big scale, a large scale. But on a small scale, GWAS can be used to determine an individual's risk of developing a particular disorder. So a single nucleotide polymorphism, remember it is SNP, it is a genomic variant at a single base position in the DNA. So the Human Genome Project revealed that there are areas of genome that varied between individuals, and the most common type of DNA sequence variation found in the genome is single nucleotide polymorphism or SNP. So if we want to identify genetic contributors to common complex diseases, for example, there is a lot of work which is going on diabetes. So one can group together thousands of people who have diabetes and then compare their SNPs or single nucleotide polymorphism patterns to those of thousands of people who do not have diabetes. So when you have these large sample size, one can use the SNPs as markers to see that certain areas of the genome appear to be the same in the people who have diabetes, and that tells us where we should look for the genes in more detail for locating or for understanding the genetic cause of the diabetes. So I'm just giving the example of diabetes, but the explanation is valid for all kinds of such diseases. So that therefore, what we know that GWAS studies helps at the individual level as well as at the population level. More than 600 million SNPs have been reported in the human genome. Remember, a SNP is one letter place where one genome varies from another genome sequence. SNPs occur normally throughout a person's DNA. They occur almost once in every 1,000 nucleotides on average. Which means that there are roughly 4 to 5 million SNPs in a person's genome. These variations occur in many individuals. And then to be classified as SNP, a variant is found in at least 1% of the population. So scientists have found, as I mentioned to you, more than 600 million SNPs in populations around the world. So when SNPs occur within a gene or in a regulatory region near a gene, they may play a more direct role in the disease by affecting the function of that particular gene. The HAP maps have also helped in GWAS, in conducting the GWAS studies. So what are HAP maps? A worldwide effort, which is known as HAP Map Project, was launched to identify and localize the genetic variants and to learn how the variants are distributed within and among the populations from different parts of the world. So up to now, the project has identified over 3.1 million SNPs across the human genome that are common to individuals of African, Asian, and European descent or ancestry. So now, what is a haplotype? So a haplotype is a physical grouping of genomic variants or polymorphisms that tend to be inherited together. So a specific haplotype, so these are the haplotypes as you can see. So a specific haplotype typically shows a unique combination of variants that reside near each other on a chromosome. So, if you look at the definition of haplotype, a haplotype refers to a set of DNA variants along a single chromosome that tend to be inherited together. So they tend to be inherited together because, so why are they tend to be inherited together? Because they are close to each other on the chromosome, and the recombination between these variants is very rare, and therefore they are always inherited together. So a haplotype can be limited to a single gene, or it can be a larger one and it can include multiple genes. Another term which is associated with GWAS studies is linkage disequilibrium. Linkage disequilibrium, or also known as LD in short form, is a genetic term that describes a non-random association of alleles at two or more loci. In simple terms, it means that certain combinations of alleles are what? They are the version of a gene, tend to be inherited together more often than would be expected by chance. So this can happen when the loci, which is the position of the genes on a chromosome, are close to each other, making them less likely to be separated by recombination during meiosis. So LD, or the linkage disequilibrium, is very important in population genetics, because it provides insights into the structure of the genomes, plus the recombination rates, and also the evolutionary history. So you have linkage equilibrium, which is different from linkage disequilibrium. So in the case of linkage equilibrium, alleles at different loci are inherited independently, whereas here in linkage disequilibrium, alleles at different loci are inherited together more frequently than expected. And linkage disequilibrium has an impact on the outcome of the GWAS studies. So it was the International HapMap project which identified the regions of the human genome where genetic variants are inherited together, which is key to understanding human diversity and the link with the disease, and to calculate the disease risk. So the HapMap project, it was undertaken in several phases. So the phase 1, which was in 2005, that part of the project identified millions of SNPs. The phase 2 was in 2007, which included more number of SNPs, and it improved the resolution of the map. And then in 2009, there was an increased coverage of the genome, and there were some more additional populations which were sampled. So as an outcome of all these efforts, a number of haplotypes were identified, and with the identification of these haplotypes, the researchers could reduce the complexity of studying the entire genome by focusing only on these representative SNPs or SNPs, rather than studying every single SNP, or going through the whole genome every time. So this project gathered the data from multiple populations, including the individuals from European, African, and Asian ancestry, to understand the similarities and the differences in genetic variation across the human groups. So the HapMap, the International HapMap, helped tremendously in carrying out the GWAS studies. So for example, it was possible to catalog the SNPs. So HapMap provided this catalog of millions of common genetic variants across the human genome. And GWAS used this catalog to scan the genome for the associations, or to find the associations with diseases or phenotypic traits. So it was found that 12% of the SNPs, they occur in protein coding regions. 8% occur in gene regulatory regions, 40% occur in non-coding introns, and other 40% occur in the intergenic sequences. So this catalog, this information from this catalog help the GWAS studies to focus only on the areas where you can detect the association between the SNPs and the disease or the haplotypes with the disease. Second is the tagging of SNPs or tagging the SNPs. So once we identify the haplotypes, and then also the patterns of the linkage disequilibrium or LD, the HapMap project made it possible to use tagging SNPs in GWAS. So instead of, as I mentioned to you, examining every SNP in the genome, researchers could use a smaller set of representative SNPs to infer the presence of others. Thereby, it helped to lower down the cost, reduce the cost and the time required to carry out GWAS studies. It also helped to understand the differences in the population structure. So the HapMap data allowed the researchers to find out the genetic differences between populations, which improve the accuracy and interpretation of the GWAS results. And this is very important because population stratification, which is the differences in allele frequencies between populations, can often lead to false associations in GWAS. Next is the LD information, the linkage disequilibrium formation. So, information. The linkage disequilibrium maps, which were made using the HapMap, helped the GWAS to identify the regions of the genome where associated SNPs are located. So this again helps to narrow down the candidate genes or the target genes and the regions for further investigation. Now let us look at the methodology of conducting the GWAS. So the design of GWAS study involves several steps. Number one is the selection of the trait or the phenotype. So there could be a target trait or there could be a disease. So first is to define, what are you studying? Are you studying the phenotype or you are going to study a specific disease, like for example type 2 diabetes or Alzheimer's or a phenotype or a quantitative trait, a phenotype which requires or which is a quantitative trait. For example, height of a person or the cholesterol levels, the ones which we can actually quantify. So first is you have to identify what is it that you are going to focus on, which is known as selection of the trait or the phenotype. Next is once you have selected the phenotype or the trait, how are you going to study it? Or in other words, the data collection or the selection of the target population. Now there are two approaches. One is case control design. So in case control design, control type of study or the individuals with the trait or disease, which are the cases, they are compared with those without it, which is the control. So this is first approach, one of the approaches, okay, to do the data collection. Second is the cohort studies. Cohort studies. So, in cohort studies, a group of individuals is followed over a period of time to see who develops the trait or who is going to get the disease, and then their genotypes are compared. Another important thing in the data collection is the sample size. Remember, we are doing something at also a population level. So GWAS typically requires large sample sizes, thousands or more, to detect the genetic associations, because the effects of most genetic variants are very small. The next is genotyping. So in genotyping, we have SNP genotyping arrays. So genotyping is performed using the arrays that detect millions of SNPs across the genome. And these SNPs are selected based on their common occurrence in the human populations. And there is something called imputation, which you need to take into consideration. So what is imputation? Imputation refers to a statistical method which is used to predict missing or unobserved genotypes at certain loci, which is the position of the SNPs on the genome, based on the known genotypes of nearby markers. So it leverages the linkage equilibrium, or LD, from the reference panels. Like, you can go back to the International HapMap project. There is another project which is called 1000 Genome Projects. So this is based on the fact that certain alleles at the nearby loci tend to be inherited together. So the imputation process, which is a statistical tool, it allows the researchers to infer the genotypes of the markers that were not directly genotyped. Thereby, you increase the resolution and the coverage of the genetic data without the need for more extensive genotyping. Then comes the quality control, which is basically data cleaning. So before analysis, the data undergoes rigorous quality control to remove low quality and SNPs or the samples, SNPs which have excess of heterozygosity, or the individuals with the missing data. So you need to remove all those from your data. So this is called quality control or data cleaning. Now this is followed by also control for population stratification. So first we remove all the missing data. Second is that we take into consideration the population stratification. So now, what is population stratification? Population stratification refers to the presence of systematic differences in allele frequencies between subpopulations in a study, often due to different ancestral backgrounds rather than actual association with the trait or disease under investigation. So we have different human populations, and in these different human populations, due to geographic or reproductive isolation, they may have distinct genetic makeups. So for instance, allele frequencies for certain SNPs may differ between populations of European descent with those of African or Asian descent. Now, this stratification can reflect the it is the reflective of historical and the evolutionary pattern of human migration and isolation. So if a GWAS study does not take into account these population differences, then the SNPs that are more common in a particular subpopulation may appear to be associated with a disease or trait simply because the disease or trait is also more common in that subpopulation. So, once again, please remember that these associations are not causal. There is no cause and effect, but rather due to differences in genetic ancestry. So, we use several statistical methods to detect and correct for the population stratification in genetic studies. So the methods that we use are like principal component analysis, or we use family-based studies, etc. Next is statistical analysis. So for each SNP, statistical tests, typically we use logistic or linear regression to examine whether there is a significant association between these SNPs and the phenotype. We also do multiple comparisons or multiple testing correction. So GWAS involves testing millions of SNPs simultaneously. So corrections for multiple comparisons need to be done, or they are necessary to avoid false positives. So the most common approach is to use a stringent p-value threshold, typically p less than 5 into 10 raised to power negative 8, which is known as the genome-wide significance threshold is used. And the last but not the least is replication. There is something which is called independent replication. So to confirm the findings of an initial GWAS, the results must be replicated in an independent population or cohort. So this will ensure that the identified associations are real, robust, and not due to random chance or any kind of bias in the initial data set. And then we have the post-GWAS analysis. So after identifying regions of the genome associated with the trait, fine mapping is performed to pinpoint the causal variants responsible for the association. This often involves looking at other variants in the region that are in linkage disequilibrium with the associated SNPs. So results are often visualized using a Manhattan plot where the negative logarithm of the p-values for each SNP is plotted against their genomic position. So these, when you follow all these steps, then you are able to complete your GWAS study and the analysis of the results that you get by conducting the GWAS study. In GWAS, several statistical tests are used to assess the association between genetic variants, usually SNPs, and the traits of interest. The most commonly used tests depend on the nature of the trait being studied, whether binary, that is, control and the diseased, or there could be a continuous one. So in the continuous one, means, like for example, the height. Height is a continuous kind of trait. So, depending on whether it is a binary trait that you are studying or you are studying the continuous one, we select the statistical test. So these are some of the common ones, like chi-square test, which is the most common used in the case control GWAS studies. So, in these kind of studies, the goal is to identify the SNPs, which are basically associated with a binary trait. For example, disease presence versus absence. And also, it helps to compare the observed frequencies of genotypes or alleles in the cases and the control population. For example, in a study of diabetes, you might test whether the frequency of the allele, let's say A allele, is different between the individuals with diabetes, which becomes the case, the disease group, and those without the disease, which is the control group. And how are you going to interpret? A significant chi-square statistic will suggest that the allele frequencies are different between the cases, the ones who are having the diabetes, and the control group, which implies that there is an association between the SNP and the disease. So this is how we use the chi-square test. Next is logistic regression. So again, for the binary traits, where again you have a presence or absence of a diseased group, logistic regression is commonly used in GWAS. It allows adjustments for covariants such as age, sex, or the population structure that may sometimes confound or may have a confusing angle or give us a confusing picture about the association. So the calculated regression coefficient for the genotype, which we use here, it can provide an estimate of the effect of the SNP on the disease risk. So if you get a significant p-value, that indicates an association between the SNP and the disease. Next is linear regression. This is used for continuous traits. For example, height, blood pressure, etc. It models the relationship between the genotype and the quantitative trait. So the coefficient for the genotype estimates the effect size or how much the trait value changes per allele. If you get a significant p-value, that suggests an association between the SNP and the trait. Next we have Cochran-Armitage trend test. This test is used to detect a trend between the number of risk alleles and disease risk. This test assumes that the trait risk increases linearly or in a linear order with the number of risk alleles. So how are you going to interpret? A significant result suggests a trend indicating that individuals with more copies of the risk alleles are going to be at a higher risk for that particular disease. Next, we have family-based tests. So in family-based studies, special statistical tests are used to avoid confounding or confusion which arises from population stratification. So these tests look for excess transmission of alleles from parents to affected offspring, or to look for bias in the transmission of alleles from heterozygous parents to affected offspring. A significant result suggests that a specific allele is more likely to be transmitted to affected individuals, indicating that there is an association with the disease. And then we have the multiple testing correction. Since GWAS involves testing millions of SNPs across the genome, it is important to correct for the large number of statistical tests to avoid false positives. For example, Bonferroni correction method is used, which is a conservative approach, and it helps to adjust the p-value threshold by dividing the standard significance level, which is generally 0.05, by the total number of tests performed. The process of interpreting the GWAS results requires careful evaluation to separate the true associations from the false positives and to derive meaningful biological insights. So here is a step-by-step breakdown of how to interpret the GWAS results. Number one, as explained in the previous slide also, it is the p-value thresholds. So in GWAS, since millions of SNPs are being tested for association with a trait, we need to control multiple testing. So to do that, a very stringent p-value threshold is used. And the standard threshold for genome-wide significance is p less than 5 into 10 raised to power negative 8. So any association with a p-value below this is considered statistically significant. Variants with p-values slightly above the threshold may still be true associations, but they will require further replication using independent cohorts. So this is how we remove the false positives. Next is the Manhattan plot, which so Manhattan plot helps us to visualize the GWAS results. So we have, there is a point, and each point represents a genetic variant with its position on the x-axis corresponding to its location on the genome, and the y-axis representing the log 10 of the p-value for association with the trait. We have significant peaks. So the peaks in the Manhattan plot indicate the regions of the genome where variants are significantly associated with the trait. So the higher the peak, the stronger the association. And the variants near the top of these peaks, they are considered strong candidates which are associated with that particular trait or the disease, and they are selected for further study. Next is the effect size, which is like where we consider two things: odds ratios or the beta coefficients. The effect size describes how much a particular variant increases or decreases the risk of a trait or a disease. So in other words, it's the magnitude of association, and it is often expressed as an odds ratio, also known as OR, for binary traits. For example, a control group versus diseased group. So disease versus no disease. Or we have the second one, which is the beta coefficient. And this is for the continuous traits. For example, height, blood pressure, etc. So the odds ratio or OR, if it is greater than 1, it means the variant increases the risk of the trait, while if you have an OR which is less than 1, it means it decreases the risk. So you can have an example, for example, OR could be 1.5, which means that individuals with this variant have a 50% higher risk of developing the trait compared to those without it. Now the beta coefficient, as mentioned earlier, this is the one that we calculate or use in the continuous traits. So if you, like for example, height or blood pressure, so if you have a positive beta, this indicates, so if beta could be positive, so positive beta indicates an increase in the trait, per additional risk allele. So one more allele, there will be an increase in the trait. And if you have a negative beta, it indicates a decrease. So with every one additional allele, there will be a decrease in the trait. So in most cases, GWAS identified variants have small effect sizes, especially for complex traits, which means they only slightly increase or decrease the risk of the trait. So here, the interpretation is very important because the values of OR and the values of the beta coefficient will help us to interpret the GWAS results properly. Next is the linkage disequilibrium or LD. Variants which are identified in the GWAS, they are often not the causal variants themselves, but they are in LD or in linkage disequilibrium with the causal variants. So LD, if you remember, it refers to the non-random association of alleles at nearby loci. So in practice, several SNPs in the same genomic region might be associated with the trait because they are inherited together. So the most significant SNP in a region may just be a marker for the causal variant. So it's important to explore the nearby variants in the linkage disequilibrium to identify the potential causal SNP. And then we have the functional annotation. Once the significant SNPs are identified, it's important to map these variants to genes. And this can be tricky because the closest gene to a SNP is not always the gene that is affected. So, methods such as expression quantitative trait loci, also known as EQTL analysis, which links the variants to gene expression, are often used to connect the variants to their functional effects. Many SNPs which are identified in GWAS are found in the non-coding region of the genome, which may affect the regulatory elements, like the enhancers, the promoters, or the splicing sites. So understanding whether the variants affects the gene regulation or the protein coding or other functional genomic elements is critical for the interpretation. So we have tools like ENCODE and roadmap epigenomics, which provide information about the functional context of genomic regions, which helps to determine whether a SNP is located in an active promoter or the enhancer region. The gene set enrichment and pathway analysis. So, after identifying the genes associated with the trait, we need to perform pathway analysis or the gene set enrichment analysis, which helps us to determine if these genes are over represented in specific biological pathways. And this information can provide us or can help us to understand the mechanisms underlying the trait of disease. So, by grouping the associated genes into specific biological pathways, for example, immune response, lipid metabolism, etc., one can understand how the genetic variation is influencing the disease processes. And then we have replication and validation. So the true associations, suppose we find that there is an association, and if it is a true association, and we are assuming that it is a true association, it should be replicated in independent cohorts or populations to rule out false positives due to the population stratification or other reasons like statistical fluctuations or the presence of biases, etc. And then it also needs experimental validation. So you have to move from the association to causation. So for that, we need to do functional experiments. For example, CRISPR or RNA interference, etc. So these can be used to determine whether the identified variants actually are causing the trait or the disease by altering the gene function or not. So an experimental validation also helps us to further understand the relationship or the association between the variation or the variant and the disease. Next is the polygenic risk scores, also known as PRS. So GWAS data can be used to calculate the polygenic risk scores, which aggregate the effects of many SNPs to estimate an individual's genetic predisposition to a disease. So the PRS or the polygenic risk score can help in identifying individuals who are at a higher risk for specific diseases, for example, heart disease or diabetes, even when each individual SNP has a small effect. So the accuracy of PRS, it goes down. It can be lower in populations with different genetic backgrounds. And then we have the gene-environment interactions. The GWAS results, they can be influenced by the environmental factors. So, you have some genetic variants that may only show significant effects in the presence of certain environmental exposures. For example, diet, smoking, etc. So these lifestyle factors. Gene-environment interaction studies are important for understanding how the genetic risks manifest under different conditions. And then we have the population stratification, which is the process of dividing members of the population into homogeneous subgroups before sampling them. So we have to take into consideration like differences in the ancestry between the cases and the controls, which can lead to actually false associations due to population stratification. So GWAS results, they are often adjusted using methods like principal component analysis, which is also known as PCA, to account for population structure and to reduce the confounding effects. So PCA, or the principal component analysis, takes a data set with multiple variables as input, and then it produces a data set into a lower subspace, that is a reduced data set with fewer variables, thereby reducing the factors which are going to confuse or confound the GWAS results due to population stratification. It is often used in exploratory data analysis for building predictive models. So here is an example of how we interpret the GWAS results. Let's say there is a trait X, okay, and there is SNP RS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is identified as significantly associated with trait X. Okay, and P is equal to 3 into 10 raised to power negative 9, and the odds ratio is 1.2, which is interpreted as that there is 20% increased risk of the trait for each copy of the risk allele. So this SNP lies in a, let's say, non-coding region near gene A. Okay, but the further analysis shows that it is in the LD, or linkage disequilibrium, with a variant that affects the expression of gene B. And let's say that the gene B is an important gene in immune response. And we are going to use the functional annotation. So functional annotation suggests that the SNP is located in an enhancer region that interacts with the promoter of gene B. And then we do the pathway analysis, which revealed that gene B is a part of a pathway involved in inflammation, providing insights into the biological mechanisms underlying the trait X. And then we are using the replication, which is an independent cohort. So we are using an independent cohort, and which is going to, the experiment is going to confirm the association, increasing the confidence in the result. So interpreting GWAS results is a multi-step process which involves statistical tests, understanding of biological concepts, and then understanding the gene environment interactions, and then the population structure. The output of the GWAS is represented or visually shown by using Manhattan plot. The plot shows the locations on the genome where the greatest statistically significant correlations between the SNPs and the target trait are located. And it is called Manhattan plot because the most statistically significant correlations, they stick out like skyscrapers. So this is how you see them on the Manhattan plot. So the x-axis shows the location on the genome, so you can see the chromosome numbers here, and the y-axis shows how significant the correlation is. So what the GWAS studies do is to plant a flag in the landscape and say, look, there is something interesting here. And it takes a lot of painstaking follow-up work to determine what that interesting thing is. Often, the placement of these, flags is not random, and they point to biologically meaningful regions of the genome. So, Manhattan is not a statistical test, but it is simply used to visualize the GWAS results. The significant SNPs are not necessarily the cause of the disease or phenotype, but due to linkage may be inherited with the causal mutation, or the main the mutation which could be the cause of a particular disease. So a Manhattan plot represents the association's statistical significance as negative log 10 p-value in the y-axis against the chromosome coordinates in the x-axis. Each dot corresponds to one variant, and higher a variant, which is the negative log 10 of the association p-value, the more significantly associated it is with the corresponding SNP with the phenotype. So GWAS studies have helped us to find the association between the genomic variants and some of the diseases. For example, the type 2 diabetes. So GWAS identified numerous loci associated with type 2 diabetes, including the variants in the TCF7L2 gene, which has been consistently associated with the disease. And these findings, they led to the understanding of the genetic risk factors for diabetes, and it has these kind of studies further helps us to do research on the prevention and the treatment of the disease. Coronary artery disease. GWAS led to the identification of a region on chromosome NP21 that is strongly associated with an increased risk of coronary artery disease. And this was one of the first major discoveries linking a common genetic variant to CAD, or coronary artery disease, which helps us to understand the biology and the how the variants have an influence on the cardiovascular risk assessment. Then we have the schizophrenia. There was a GWAS meta-analysis which was conducted by the Psychiatric Genomics Consortium, which identified over 100 loci associated with schizophrenia. And one of the most significant findings was the association of the C4a gene, which is involved in the immune system and the synaptic pruning, suggesting new biological mechanisms that contribute to the disease. And then we, of course, have the cancer, where the GWAS identified the variants in the FGFR2 gene as this being the one which is associated with an increased risk of breast cancer. And this has contributed to a more better understanding of the breast cancer risk factors beyond the usual study that we do regarding the mutations in BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. Another disease which is a focus of attention these days is the Alzheimer's disease. GWAS led to the discovery of several genes associated with Alzheimer's disease, like APOE, and then more recent loci like CLU, PICOM, and then CR1. And these discoveries have led us to have a better understanding of the pathways involved in neurodegeneration and new approaches for drug development. And then the Crohn's disease. GWAS uncovered many genetic variants which are linked to Crohn's disease, such as those in NOD2 and IL23R genes. Age-related macular degeneration. One of the earliest and the most significant successes of GWAS was identifying the genetic variants associated with AMD, which is a leading cause of blindness in the elderly. Variants in the CFH, which is the complement factor H gene, were found to significantly increase the risk of developing AMD. And this discovery has provided understanding about the role of the immune system in the disease and helped us to come up with new therapeutic approaches. In this age of big data, GWAS studies have reached a different level of significance. Earlier, one of the key challenges was the relatively small sample sizes, which limited the statistical power to detect the associations with small effect sizes. But now, in the age of big data, large consortia like UK Biobank, 1000 Genome Projects, etc., they all collaborate, and because of their collaboration, it is possible to have access to sample sizes which are very large, in the hundreds or thousands or millions of individuals, which actually helps a lot in conducting the GWAS studies. Second is the use of meta-analysis. So meta-analysis, combining the data from the multiple studies, have increased the ability to detect the genetic variants associated with diseases, which helps to improve the precision and also to uncover the rare variants that were earlier undetectable. And then we have the integration of multi-omics data. So GWAS primarily focuses on identifying the associations between the genetic variants and traits. But the integration of other layers of data like epigenomics, transcriptomics, proteomics, and metabolomics is now possible. And this approach enables, this integration of all these different omics, helps the researchers to explore the functional consequences of genetic variants, which helps us to understand the mechanisms by which these different omics influence the traits or the diseases. Next is the functional insights. So the big data allows for the integration of gene expression. For example, eQTLs, DNA methylation, chromatin accessibility data, and we are able to link GWAS variants to the different biological pathways. The polygenic risk scores. Big data has enabled the development of polygenic risk scores, which aggregates the effects of thousands of common variants to predict an individual's genetic predisposition to certain diseases. For example, the cardiovascular disease or the diabetes or cancer. So as we have more access to more data and the data sets grow, the PRS are becoming more accurate and potentially useful in, especially in the clinical settings, which helps to give personalized risk prediction, which leads to early intervention and then also leads to come up with tailored treatment strategies. And then another very important thing is the machine learning in GWAS, and also the role of AI or the artificial intelligence. So the use of machine learning and the artificial intelligence tools has become very important in GWAS, and they have these tools, they help to identify complex patterns in the data, such as gene-gene interactions, like things like epistasis and gene-environment interactions, which are very difficult to detect using traditional statistical methods. The artificial intelligence or AI, it can improve the selection of relevant genetic features and identify the novel patterns that generally can be missed using the classical GWAS approach, which which will help us to further understand the disease risk to particular individuals or populations. So we have something also called phenome-wide association studies, which is called PheWAS. So building on GWAS, PheWAS explores the association between a single genetic variant and multiple phenotypes, which enables the researchers to understand pleiotropy. Pleiotropy is how one gene can influence multiple traits, and then one can explore the broader impact of genetic variation. So in this slide, you can see how the polygenic risk score was calculated using the GWAS studies for coronary artery disease. This study was published in Nature Genetics, and people who scored the highest in risk on a polygenic test for coronary artery disease, which was about 8% of the participants, they were predicted to be 3 times more likely to have contracted the disease. So coronary artery disease occurs when plaque builds up in the blood vessels around the heart, and it is a scary precursor to the heart attacks. So in this chart, you can see that as the polygenic risk score goes up, which is measured as the the percentile, so does the incidence of coronary artery disease in the study population. But then some people who who actually question the relevance of GWAS study, they say, are these scores, the ones that we are calculating here, are these scores useful, truly useful for the patients? Because you still don't eliminate the risk assessments of patients by simply asking them questions about their lifestyles, family histories, and we still are dependent on the data collected by asking these these questions from the patients. And the polygenic risk score may only be more meaningful for people who score on the extreme ends, extreme ends. So, you might have people who may score in the 60th percentile for heart disease risk, but it is only those who are at the 90th percentile where the odds of acquiring the heart disease goes up considerably. So, the results of the polygenic risk score are still under debate as to how much of a help they are going to be at an individual level and at the population level. GWAS study has its own limitations. Number one, missing heritability. GWAS explains only a small fraction of the heritability of complex traits, which leaving a lot of it which is unexplained. And this actually suggests that many genetic factors, including the rare variants or the interactions between the genes, might be getting missed when we are conducting the GWAS studies. The other important limitation is the population sample size. So we study as small effect sizes. So most of the variants identified through GWAS, they have very small effect sizes, meaning they only slightly increase or decrease the risk of a trait or disease, which actually limits their predictive power for individuals. So at a population level, maybe it has a meaning, but at an individual level, it is very difficult to make a prediction about its power of causing a particular trait or a disease. Next is, of course, the population stratification. So GWAS results, they can be confounded or get confused by differences or can give confusing results because of the differences in the ancestry between cases and controls. So if the populations are not well matched, the associations may reflect population structure rather than a true genetic link to the trait. So we can't compare an Australian population and the genetic variants between an Australian population and an Asian population. So that's called population stratification, and we need to take that into account when we are conducting the GWAS studies. Next is the rare variants and structural variations. So GWAS typically focus on SNPs, the common SNPs or common single nucleotide polymorphisms. When you have rare variants and or structural variations like CNVs or copy number variations, they are often missed. It's unable to detect. Though they also play a very important role in the calculation for the disease risk. Gene environment interactions. So GWAS do not account properly for the interaction between the genetic variants and the environmental factors, which maybe are very crucial for understanding the development of complex diseases. Linkage disequilibrium. GWAS identifies the regions of the genome that are associated with the traits. But as mentioned earlier, these regions may contain multiple genes, and due to the LD or the linkage disequilibrium, it can be challenging to pinpoint the causal variant or the one which is responsible for that particular trait. Which brings us to the next limitation, which is the causal inference. GWAS identifies the statistical associations between the genetic variants and traits, but it does not directly provide the causal evidence. And then we have the complex trait interactions. So, complex traits are often influenced by interactions between multiple genes. Like for example, I mentioned earlier the epistasis, and also between the genes and the environmental factors. And GWAS studies, they are limited in their ability to capture these interactions. GWAS has helped us a lot in understanding the genetic basis of many traits and diseases. However, it raises several ethical concerns and need careful ethical considerations while carrying out these kind of studies. Number one is the informed consent. GWAS often involves large data sets which are collected from different populations and diverse populations, and sometimes these data sets are collected from multiple studies. So the participants need to understand the full implications of sharing their genetic data. And as a researcher, also it is incumbent on us to be transparent and to explain to the participants about the use of their genetic data. So and many times the participants and the researchers fail to understand or fail to appreciate that the genetic information which they are collecting, it has long-term implications, which as sometimes it is not clear at the time of consent. So one needs to understand and also needs to explain everything to the participants. Next is the privacy, which is the risks of re-identification. So generally, when we are collecting the data, of course, the data is most of the time it's quite anonymous, but there is a risk of this data of being re-identified in the future, because there are advances in data analysis techniques that can make it possible to link the genetic information back to individuals, which can pose a risk to their privacy. We need to also understand that data which is collected in GWAS studies might be used for purposes beyond what participants initially consented to or gave their consent for, which actually raises the concerns about the repurposing of data. That same data can be used for even more deeper studies. So the participants gave their consent for only one study, but once you have the repository of this data, you are going to use it. A person can use it again. So the participants may not foresee all the potential uses of their data, such as for commercial purposes, or in the areas that on a principal basis they generally do not support. For example, military purposes or for the law enforcement, etc. Next is the genetic discrimination. This is one of the major concerns of GWAS studies, which is the potential for genetic information to be used in ways that lead to discrimination. So for example, employers, the insurance companies, the governments could use the genetic data to discriminate against individuals with certain genetic predispositions, which can affect their employment opportunities or the access to insurance, or things like identifying the genetic variants which are associated with traits like mental health disorders, addictions, intelligence, etc., which can lead to the stigmatization of these individuals or certain groups. So this is one of the major concerns of or fallouts of these kind of GWAS study results. Population representation. Most GWAS studies have been conducted primarily in the populations of European descent. And because of that, there is a certain bias, because we don't know whether the trends that we see in the populations of European descent, is it valid for other populations or not. So this bias limits we can't generalize the findings. And also within the populations of European descent, we need to find out if the populations belonging to minority groups have been included in the studies or not, because they also need an equal representation in the studies in order to understand the population risk due to a certain genetic variant. Next is the misinterpretation and overemphasis of GWAS results. GWAS findings may create a perception that the complex traits or behaviors are solely determined by genetics, which sort of downplays the role of environmental factors, the social factors, and the behavioral factors. And often the interpretation of the GWAS studies can mislead people and may lead them to come up with simplistic understanding, very simplistic understanding of especially traits like intelligence, traits like obesity, behavioral anomalies or mental health, which actually fosters the idea that all these, intelligence, obesity, and mental health, these are purely genetic and they are unchangeable. But so there should not be an overemphasis and misinterpretation of the results of GWAS. Next is the return of results. GWAS studies can uncover genetic information which is generally not directly related to the original research question, but potentially important for a participant's health. So there is an ethical debate, about whether the researcher which started with a different question but discovered something else, then is it the researcher's duty to inform the participants of these incidental, we call them incidental findings. They were not trying to discover this part, but they accidentally discovered it. Okay. So the question is, do they inform the participants, especially if their findings have serious health implications? So this is again one of the ethical debates which is going on related to GWAS studies. And then we have the eugenics and GWAS. So GWAS findings can potentially lead to practicing eugenics in the future. We don't know, but it can, where the individuals or the governments or stakeholders can seek or can look to control the genetic makeup of future generations, such as through selective reproduction Or nowadays, we also have the techniques for genetic enhancement, for example, the designer babies, etc. So, in this slide, we can go through or summarize the steps which are involved in conducting the GWAS studies. So, we have the data collection. So, data can be collected from study cohorts or available genetic and phenotypic information from biobanks or repositories. Any of these could be the place from where you can collect the data. Next is the genotyping. So the genotypic data can be collected using the microarrays to capture the common variants, or you can also use next generation sequencing methods. You can do the whole genome sequencing or the whole exome sequencing depending on the goal of your GWAS study. Next is the quality control. Quality control includes steps, at the both wet lab stage or the dry lab stage. So the wet lab stage includes genotype calling and then DNA switches. So what is genotype calling? Genotype calling is the process of determining the genotype for each individual and is typically it's done for the position in which a SNP or a variant has already been called. We use the word calling here to signify the estimation of one unique SNP or genotype. And then we have DNA switches, which are the regions of DNA that can be bound by a particular activator or a repressor in a sequence specific manner. So a switch can either be near the coding region or many megabases away. So the switch is going to control the transcription of genes in different tissues and at different times in development. The dry lab involves clustering of individuals according to genetic substrata. So the dry lab stages in the genetic data analysis involves steps like deletion of bad SNPs and individuals. So in genetic studies, some SNPs or SNPs or there could be individuals in a sample that have low quality or they have unreliable data. So these SNPs or the individuals are usually removed, which helps us to improve the accuracy of our analysis. Next is the detection of population strata in the sample. So the population stratification, remember, it refers to the difference in allele frequencies between subpopulations due to ancestry rather than due to the traits being studied. So detecting and accounting for these strata is crucial to avoid confusing results in GWAS studies. And how we are going to remove them? We are going to remove them by using the principal or by calculating the PCA, which is the principal component analysis. So this is the one which is used to reduce the dimensionality of the genetic data while retaining the more important information. So PCs summarize the genetic variation across the sample, often reflecting the population substructure. PCs are frequently plotted to visualize the clustering of individuals based on their genetic background. And then we have the genetic data which can be phased and then imputed. So this is known as imputation. Which is done by using information from the matched reference populations from repositories such as 1000 Genome Project, or we also have something called TopMed. So what you see on your screen in this example, the genotypes of SNP1 and SNP3 are imputed based on the directly assayed genotypes of other SNPs. Next is the it's called association testing or genetic association tests. These are run for each genetic variant using an appropriate model. For example, additive, non-additive, linear, logistic regression, linear regression, etc. And factors like population stratification, multiple testing, etc. are controlled, and output is inspected for unusual patterns, and summary statistics are generated. And then we have the results from this association, which is subjected to maybe meta-analysis. So you have the results from multiple smaller cohorts, and they are all being combined, and we are using a standardized statistical approach, which is the meta-analysis, to understand. And then once we have the inference from that, we need to do the replication, which is that the results they are replicated using an internal replication or an external replication in an independent cohort. So for external replication, the independent cohort must be ancestrally matched, and not you can't share the individuals or family members with the discovery cohort. And then we have the post GWAS analysis. So actually this is, here you can see the Manhattan plot, which is the visualization of the data. So we use the Manhattan plot, which we discussed in the previous slides. Now for the post GWAS analysis, we use SNPs, information like gene mapping, gene to function mapping, pathway analysis, genetic correlation analysis, polygenic risk prediction, anything, all these things are taken into consideration. And after GWAS, the functional hypothesis can also be tested using the experimental techniques, such as I mentioned earlier, CRISPR, we can do a lot of reporter assays, and then we can validate the results in human trait or disease control models. So in case we have to study the SNP or SNP heritability using the GWAS, we follow the same steps which we discussed in the previous slide. We collect the genotype and the phenotypic or phenotype data. We do the quality control. Then we conduct a GWAS. Then we calculate the genetic relationship matrix, which is also known as GRM, which actually, so GRM quantifies the genetic similarity between each pair of individuals based on their SNP data. So the GRM is used to estimate the total additive genetic variance across all SNPs. Remember, when we are doing heritability, we have two components. We have the phenotypic variance, and then we have the genotypic variance. So the single nucleotide polymorphism heritability, or the SNP heritability, it quantifies the proportion of the phenotypic variance in a trait that is attributable to the additive effects of SNPs. So the steps that we follow, they are similar to what we discussed in the previous slide. So after that, you just estimate the SNP heritability, and then you interpret the results, which actually tells you the proportion of the phenotypic variance explained by the SNPs, which are included in your analysis. If you have a higher SNP heritability, it means that more of the variation in the trait is attributable to genetic factors captured by the SNPs. And then after interpretation, we consider the potential biases, like for example, linkage disequilibrium, which can lead to the overestimation or the underestimation of SNP heritability. We look at the sample sizes, which are often should be very large in order to obtain the accurate SNP heritability estimates, because the smaller sizes can lead to biased estimates. As we know that for GWAS, we need very big data and a big sample size. One can use a number of software tools these days to arrange the data, to analyze the data. So for example, we have P-Link. It's a free open source whole genome association analysis tool set. And this has been designed to perform a range of basic, also large scale analysis in a very highly computational level. We also have Plato. Then we have, of course, R programming, which is being used even in GWAS studies besides others. And then we have the Bioconductor. So this Bioconductor project is a free open source software, which is, I think, developed by MIT and some other US technical labs based in US. And the software helps to carry out very rigorous and reproducible analysis of data from the current and then many emerging biological assays, including GWAS. So in conclusion, we know that GWAS has completely revolutionized the understanding of genetic traits, which up till now we were studying only by using classical Mendelian inheritance patterns. And then at a population level and with very large data set, it is possible to understand the traits very well and how they are being transmitted, and also to predict the genetic predisposition towards a particular disease or towards a particular phenotypic trait by carrying out the GWAS studies. Of course, challenges are there while conducting GWAS studies, but at the moment, with the improvement in the software and with the improvement in the sample size, because of the use of big data, GWAS is emerging as a powerful tool in genomics. And the future research in the field of GWAS is going to further enhance its impact in understanding the causal relationship and disease associationship between a phenotypical trait or a disease with respect to SNPs. So with this, we come to the end of this presentation. Thank you so much for listening. For more information and for doing self-assessment on this topic, please visit www.biotechnologyforyou.com.